Okay, let's get started. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Let me just first off say thank you to everyone for joining us for tonight. It's our February edition of TPMA Talk with our wonderful guest, Christine Itwaru. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm really excited about it. It's about a product practice that's on the rise, something that I think many more people in the product profession and beyond can be made more aware of. And we'll get into the actual content more in one moment. But a couple of housekeeping things. It's going to be an interactive event tonight. We'll have some polls. We'll also have be collecting questions for a question and answer period. So if you want to get started, feel free to go to slido.com and enter in the code 511165 or take a pic of the QR code. Throughout the conversation, just enter your questions, whether it be in the Zoom chat or through the Slido. We definitely want this to be an interactive conversation, and it's going to be a great one. So before I move on, I have to say a quick big thanks to our sponsors, and we have someone representing our sponsors here tonight, Christine. Our sponsors help support us in expanding the Toronto product management community, and they provide us with necessary resources that are important for such programs like our live events, which we will get back to, and many of our other programs. So thank you to our sponsors for helping TPMA continue to evolve on our mission. All right, so tonight's topic is on product operations, and our guest is known for her impact in this emergent discipline, not just within our organization, but across her customer bases and our industry as a whole. I'm sure you've seen her name on a number of different talks across different events. But before I pass things over, I want to do a quick poll. So if everyone can just get to Slido again, slido.com 511165 or scan the QR code. Let's take a look. How familiar on a scale of 1 to 5 are you with product operations? Give everyone a moment to cue in here. All right, look at that. We've got some responses going in. No one's an expert here. Christine, feel free. I think you're at 5, so we can.
Staying out of the poll. No, I'm not an expert. I'm trying.
Beautiful. So gauging the room, we've got most people here who are just learning about product operations or are kind of mid-ground, and that's great. I think this conversation today is going to really help explain what product operations is and get our appetites excited for learning more. So without further ado, let me properly introduce our guest. Our guest today has been in product management for the past 11 years. She started off as a PM and followed her passion for connecting people through solid product experiences, building and leading strong product teams, and then pivoted into product operations at Pendo. And since kicking off the team in 2019, she's grown it to 12 and counting. She's led product-led transformation at Pendo and across her customer base. She's a clear champion for product ops and all that it stands for, empowering product teams, collaborating across organizations, creating scale, and ultimately freeing up product managers to deliver value to customers. So please welcome me in joining Christine Itwaru. Christine, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Rena. Thanks everybody for spending the time with me this evening. I know it's late where most of you, if not all of you, are, so I appreciate it. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all today. And if you're comfortable, turn cameras on. I do like to make anything that I do interactive and kind of watch reactions and get to talk to everybody. So jump in at any point and ask questions, like Rena said. And yeah, let's just have fun and kind of enjoy the conversation. I'm not trying to talk at you. I'm gonna share some stuff that I learned along the way from both product and then product operations and building it and doing it. But I really do want you all to participate to the extent that you can. So let me just go ahead and start sharing my screen. And Serena, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see that? Awesome. Cool. So we're gonna talk about how we want all of you to get on this train, or most folks who are product management passionate or product led or trying to push this within their organization. And so I'll take you through some content today that kind of helps folks to also help them have a conversation inside their organization around why product operations is really important and why we're here to stay, and then help you understand what it is that we do for those who are new to the space. So before I go into that, I'll talk a little bit about myself. Marina gave an awesome intro, thank you. But really quickly, New York City, born and raised, really homebody. That's what I am, and it was really hard for me to end up leaving New York, but I'll get to that point. St. John's is where I went to school, and I got a degree in marketing with a weird thing called a concentration in finance, which I didn't think was going to take me anywhere. But hey, I lived in New York, and that's what most people were like, hey, let's do something in marketing or finance, and that's going to be safe. I started at a small accounting firm called Holtz Rubenstein Reminick, or HRR, and then they got bought over by a company called Baker Tilly, where I was the event manager and senior marketing manager there, senior marketing coordinator. Very different from what I'm doing today. I did not enjoy the space. I found it really boring, but I did it because in New York, like, you go into something with dollars, right? And I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in the safe world of this. But then 2008 hit and I got really bored and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't care that we were in a recession. Like, at the time I was like, all right, I'm just going to save up and kind of do my own thing. I'm in New York. I'll figure it out. Self-employed, did a bit of event management, and just kind of had fun meeting people all over the city and all over New York. So that was great. And then I was like, all right, I got to get back into something. So I have a friend who was like, hey, I really think you'd be great at product marketing, um, with your background and just, how you kind of like love to do the connection thing and teach people about, how to kind of do these events and whatnot. And so I was like, okay. So I went over to Jeffries, which is a Wall Street firm, again, staying real safe. And I was like, great, this is a big company and I'm going to be really established here. I'm going to do product marketing. And then my boss was like, hey, yeah, you're going to do product marketing, then we're going to roll you off into going into sales or trading or something. You're going to make the real money here. And I was like, okay, sweet, let's figure this out. And I hated it. I hated every aspect of finance. And I remember just falling in love with the product that I was product marketing or doing the product marketing around and enablement inside of Jeffries. And a couple weeks in, I was sitting with a user and I was like, I feel terrible that this product's not solving for his pain. You just wanted something really simple around call management. It was a research analyst. And I felt just, I needed to build something better for him. And I didn't know that that was product management. And so I went back to, this is in London at the time, and I went back to my hotel room and I drew up on the back of a paper napkin something I thought that might solve his pain. And then my boss, who was also the main engineer at the time, ended up coding it, putting in the product. The next day, it ended up being like the number one used thing for I don't know how long across our research analysts. So it was really cool. And I just was like, okay, I want to do more of that. And he's like, you're doing product management, not product marketing. And I was like, I don't even know what this thing is. So that's how I fell in. And as Rita mentioned, it was 11 years ago, but I haven't looked back. I wanted to do more for customers and I wanted to solve pain. That led me to Iprio, where the product I built at Jeffries, they asked me to build a similar product, but across multiple financial services companies. So there's a theme of like boring domain, right? It continued to be in this finance space, and they were, a company that was trying to push finance and fintech. Iprio was actually purchased by IHS Market, which became even more massive. But this is where I met Pendo. I was really struggling to figure out what our users were doing in our products. And Pendo came through the door, and they were a baby company at the time. And I was like, oh man, like this could be super powerful. And then eventually we ended up signing with them 28 days after I moved over to Pendo as director of product. Iprio moved me down to Raleigh, which was really cool. And then when I met Pendo, I was like, all right, this is definitely going to be a match made in heaven here. So I am no longer bored with the people I serve and the space I serve. I shouldn't say the people. I met some really interesting people, the space. I absolutely love product, and I feel like honestly, it could be a way of life if you really embrace it and just look at it as an iterative way to just get better at everything you do. And so that's why I'm here at Pendo. And when I joined Pendo, I joined as the director of product, doing the typical roadmap management, building plans with the team, vision, strategy, building the team in terms of maturation and numbers. And then I found that my core customer became the product manager and the people that were reporting to me, because they were just like, we want to do all of this, but we have this lack of infrastructure and we're moving so quickly, especially trying to grab new markets, that how do we do this the right way? It's less about building the thing on the product and more about supporting the system around, or building a system around PMs. And that's the birth of product ops at Pendo. Was our PMs really struggling to keep up and do a couple things that they should have been focusing on when they were scrambling. So I'll take you through some of that today. One speaker rule I have, and I know I'm speaking to like a Canadian audience. I figured this might resonate, but it resonates so well in the US. Please participate, like I said. So just make sure, if you can, turn your cameras on or go ahead and ask questions and whatnot. I'm here to talk everybody through. Best show, absolutely, Devin. Like, I absolutely love David. Okay, so I'm gonna start by, just quote that resonates a lot. You can't really know where you're going until you know where you've been. And that's true for most, if not everything in life. So I'm going to take you guys through a history of product management today, which might be a bit interesting. And for those of you who already know it, awesome. Might be a little boring for the next couple minutes, but jump in if you have an aha moment. And I won't read through all the words on the screen, but we'll keep it simple. So product started almost 100 years ago at this point. And for those who joined a little later in the beginning, we were talking about how long it took for product to become an established craft, and how quickly over the last couple of years product ops has risen. So we want to continue that momentum, and it's folks like yourselves that are going to help with that, because as we grow in this world, in this SaaS and technology business, we have to figure out the right thing and to help our companies grow the right way. So let's keep that in mind. But if you look back in the 30s, it started with Neil McElroy, who put out this manifesto asking to hire brand men. So if anybody's watched Mad Men, you can definitely put a little like hand raise up. I did. At some point, like that's what those guys were actually, guys and gals in the show were looked at as, is this brand men stuff, and we'll get over there. But they were supposed to do everything, like track sales, managing product, promotions. But the goal at the end of it was so that they could free up time for the sales team to focus on selling, to actually be out there in the field and do what they need to do for Procter and Gamble. And about 10 years later, at HP, Bill and David were applying a similar method that they learned from McElroy, but they wanted to put these brand men, or now the PM in some sort of form, closer to the customer. And so they introduced this idea of this smaller organized teams that rallied around specific product things. So, who's selling this and which team is dedicated to that. And this is cool because you start to see this voice of the customer that start to arise a little bit back in the 40s. And it became central to product teams so that people could focus on areas of impact for them. And then in the 50s, we saw the first instance of Kanban it was called Kaizen. It's not true Kanban, but we end up kind of seeing the similarities a little bit later on, where they implemented this just-in-time production across Toyota, where the entire company was responsible for helping to grow Toyota. So, if you're looking at, I think the example I saw was like a door and how to make that better. Which teams would be on it, who's actually going out and testing it, how are you going to change that to make the experience better for the customer? You have a whole bunch of different folks organizing across the organization to continuously improve the company and stay close to the customer back at that time. And in the 60s, the brand manager role became really important because the consumer started seeing more options in the market than ever before. And there's a lot of reasons behind this, but a lot of it's more advertising, more competition and saturation in the market. But there's this funny thing that happened where we're seeing it a lot today and continuously, which is this emotional attachment to products, right? And if you think of a commercial, I don't know, I don't want to call out specific names, but there are a lot of commercials. I don't know if you guys watch Super Bowl, where they try to focus on like your emotions and how you feel, and it really creates something that's lasting. And so we start to see that rise. But it becomes the norm. And then what happens out of that is sentiment management, and sentiment valuation starts becoming front and center for product teams and for companies, right? And we'll talk about like NPS and some of the sentiment stuff that we're seeing today. And then the 70s, there was a break in product manager and product marketing manager. This is where I had found that weird kind of, what am I doing? Is it product manager, product marketing manager? What am I doing here? But there was a recognition to break it out and have somebody dedicated to ideation and the right things to build, and then somebody dedicated to selling the thing the right way, or positioning, right? And then there was accountability behind that. So this is really cool because a lot of this presentation is based on this. It's like, what are you accountable for as a PM? And what are you accountable for as a product ops person? And if there are PMMs on the phone, what are you accountable for as a product marketing manager? And when you see the blur of the lines today, when product ops keeps rising, go back to that home and ask yourself what you're being measured on. And I very quickly, I promise you, you'll see that your roles are not, they're not going to be as crossed as you see, or as you think. And then the 80s, I'm almost there, guys, but hopefully it's interesting. Scott Cook and Tom, I can't say his last name, Poole, at Intuit, they created this Follow Me Home program, which is really cool. And they sent their folks into the field, into people's homes where they could see folks install software, which was really interesting. And remember, the old way of upgrading software was we would get this ROM CD, right? For those who do remember that stuff, sometimes floppy disks for those who remember that, along with this massive book that gave you instructions. Like, imagine change management for all that stuff versus today. But if you could put the team closer to the customer and understanding the pain, not just for the software, but like all it was around the software, which was really cool to actually get that thing to do what it needed to do. In the 90s, there's a further breakout of the program manager and engineer, right? Two more roles where you have the blurring of the lines between somebody who's saying what to build and then actually doing it. There was a moment where they were doing the same thing. But more companies started adopting the way of working that Intuit did, and had developers actually focus on the build, and then the PMs focus on the customers, which is exactly how it should be, right? But I do believe in having developers at the table as well, for what it's worth. It helps them build that much faster. In the 2000s, this is where Agile comes up, and Agile sometimes gets a bad rep, but I absolutely love Agile teams. It's a culture, it's not a process. So that's the way people should look at it, is really build that healthy culture. Teams focus on Agile development and depart from the waterfall way of working, which is kind of that spec-driven, heavy documentation type world. And then they focus on that incremental value delivery, which was really cool. And then in 2010, we saw the data-driven product team and the CPO, which is really cool. So that's kind of, what's going to take us into today. But this awesome departure happened where decisions were not based on gut or intuition. And I felt this myself, where I was like, oh my gosh, what is this thing called Pendo that is giving me insights and the ability to see what's happening versus me querying IIS logs through my developer, who's very expensive. And it gave our executives so much more power and our product managers to get the seat at the table. And data-driven decision-making really empowers product teams to understand where any of their efforts should go, not just through build, but also through adoption campaigns with their PMM manager. Just think of different examples like that. It's a lot, but I promised more David. So process it, ask questions, and it is a bit interesting. And today, this is where we are. We're in the space where product-led is not just a buzz term. A lot of companies, particularly in SaaS, are looking to be more product-led, and they recognize the need for the product to speak for itself in a world where attention spans are limited. I'm sure some of you, even though I'm talking, are on your phone. I'm sure that somebody's slacking somewhere because Slack finally got fixed today. It's fine. I get it. Just, listen to the story if you can. But alternatives to your product are everywhere, and they could be very cheap. Some of them are very expensive. Some of them offer all these bells and whistles. But the transparency from you to your customer through the product, and from you to your customer through the way you service them, is super critical. And so that's how we look at this whole notion of product-led, is how do we make it all work through the product and empower the customer to do exactly what they need to do with less human touch. And so the other thing that we should take a look at is how COVID shifted a lot of things, or has made a lot of things shift. And so I mentioned choice and alternatives, super prevalent. There's a lot of people that took advantage, rightfully so, of starting their own business, competing with lots of little companies out there and trying to crush it. And some people actually did really well. Remote working, you're all home probably. It's a thing. We're probably not going back to that way of life where we're 5 days in the office. I don't even know if we're going to do like 4 at this point, right? Now people are thinking of 4 days overall working. So that's kind of cool. But, we'll all get there hopefully one day. And then loss of employees, it all kind of it comes from that, right? Like being able to do what you want, especially when you've got families at home. Um, and bringing kind of more choice to the forefront for you. And the other piece is finding new ways to bring people up to speed because of everything there, right? Like you've got all of this change in software, all of these competitors. Today we got a comp intel report where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is another thing now we have to stay ahead of, which is fine. But I'm like, what does this mean for these other teams? How do we make sure that they're also focusing on our yearly goal in addition to making sure they're mitigating any risk because of this new thing, right? And companies that found themselves in the middle of a rush in general. One of my favorite stories was I met this woman who was at this company and I'll show you this as I'm talking about it, and kind of like I'm trying to think of how to classify it. It's home furnishings, right? One of those online home furnishings, kind of like a Wayfair, but over in Europe. And she was saying to me, she called me, she's in a panic. She's like, they want product operations now. This was 2020 was when the pandemic started, and it was March when it started picking up. I would say in April, she reached out in a panic, like, what do I do? And I was like, oh my gosh, like that. She's like, it hit so quickly in a couple of weeks after the pandemic that she needed to find a way to stand up a product ops team to support all the craziness that was happening, not just for the PMs, but for the entire company that was touching the product, which is really cool and intense at the same time. And so if you look at that, like this is a stat from HBR, Harvard University study, where they said like even through the pandemic, you're seeing this steady rise in home remodeling market, right? That was the closest thing I could find to this woman's team. And we see a bunch of different industries that went through that during the pandemic, which was really cool, but also it created chaos for their employees. So I'm going to pivot to why do PMs exist, right? Like we look back at that history, and if I could distill it down to 2 things, I would say PMs exist to do 2 core jobs. One is to solve a problem or solve problems, and 2 is to make an experience better. And if you just absorb that and think about it as product people, you really want that for your customers. I want to solve the problems that they're facing day to day so that they can serve their customers better. And I want to make the experience in doing that the best that it could be. And so if you think about the history I just showed you, all of these little bubbles here are all the things that a product manager has traditionally been expected to do. And so they've been solving pain for customers and stakeholders for decades. And it's only up until recently that companies really began putting this structure in place to ensure that they're successful. And so I put 2 different colors here because we're starting to see the product ops folks start to cover some of this, which we'll talk about. But being one human responsible for a product or a core area of a product and also trying to live your best life today is not a very easy thing to do. And we all deserve to live our best life. And so that's how we create a healthy environment for our employees. It's how we create healthy product teams. We have to find a way to make sure that we can set systems up for scale. And sorry, I just saw a good question here, which was, yeah, solve problems or identify the problems to solve. We can definitely talk about that a little bit later. Ultimately, we want them to solve problems, but they have to go through the process of finding the right problems to solve. That's absolutely true. And for product managers, how are they measured? Go back to like, what is it that they focus on? So this is really interesting too. So let's focus on the blue for a second. The blue is traditionally what product managers and product teams focused on in the past, which is product usage, and still today, not just the past. How sticky is their app or the area of the app, quality of the product that they're putting out, performance, more so tied with engineering metrics, retention, all the blue stuff you're seeing on the right. But today, because of that interesting departure where we said that, or the change where the CPO now has a seat at the table, they're also responsible for things on the left, which are more business metrics. And that's really scary. And it takes a lot of courage for product managers, particularly those who are about, I would say, like 4 years and under in their craft, to own profitability and revenue and conversion and like really work on contributing to those goals. And so when you think about that, how do we expect them to want to do all of that and feel supported around all of that, and also continue to do this, right? So what if we could allow them to focus on actual business outcomes, which is ultimately the goal of this? And so I put out on LinkedIn a little while back what pain folks had that made their company invest in product ops, right? And inclusive of the metrics and stuff that I just showed you, where they wouldn't have time to focus. We saw lack of transparency, release and beta management. Devin, I think that that's your specialty from what I heard, kind of like release stuff. Product training and enablement, which is also part of release and beta, and then PMs just generally not being able to focus on plan. And it's almost equal distribution. And LinkedIn only allowed me to put 4 things up here, and I was like, please, people, put more things in the comments. But I don't think people are reading that far. I really wanted to see what else is on this list, so I'm going to continue to dig a little bit deeper in this. So we might see less of this pain and more of this impact if we were able to put the right structure around the product teams. So this is from our State of Product Leadership report last year, and this is awesome. Like when I saw this, they like freaked out when they got this stat back. So Christine, you're going to freak out when you see this thing. So for PMs, we asked them what's the likelihood to recommend their chosen career path to a friend as a product manager. And for those who have product ops teams, their NPS is over a 20. And for those who don't have product ops teams, they're 0 or negative, which is crazy. So when you think about that, it's those who feel really supported and feel like they are well prepared and the company's investing in their future as a product manager who will actually recommend this to a colleague or a friend. And we look at all of the articles around burnout in general, but when you think about PM, for those who are PMs or have been PMs, it's not easy. Like the weight of the world is on your shoulders when you're also now tying revenue into your decision making. So the thought of having a partner behind you or with you, like it's just an awesome thing to consider. So enter product operations, which is how we partner here at Pendo. And so what our purpose is to create a structure that supports modern product management teams. And there's no one size fits all. But we do this here by serving as creators and drivers of iterative process and alignment across organizations. And I want to spend a minute on the iterative word, because recently we saw product operations get kind of like a bad rep from folks who have been in product management for quite a while, saying that they're kind of process mongers and people who are just so stuck to kind of doing things one way and not really thinking. Absolutely not true. And so for those who are in this product operations space and product management, remember that your role in product ops is to operate like a PM and iterate however long. Like at Pendo, we do it every 6 months on our processes and the way that we collaborate across the company and with the PMs, because we're moving that much quicker than most companies I've ever been in, right? I was employee 320 3 years ago. Today, we are almost 1,000. And so we have to keep up. But if you're going to stick to the way you've done things in the past, you're only going to stay where you are. You're not going to move forward. And if you're not moving forward, your company's not moving forward. So make sure you focus on that iterative word for you and your teams across product ops and product management. Now, this is where it might get a little confusing, but I'm going to take you through the similarities as well. So product managers deliver outcomes and experience, and product ops people deliver outcomes and experience. But product managers do this generally through product features, tangible things that will drive outcomes for customers, value that will come out through something that they're doing on their app. And product ops will drive value through their customers who are product managers and their revenue team members. And for Pendo, even sometimes our data science teams and our finance teams through process and communication and systems that we set up across the company. Those are our first customers. And then we work with making sure that the outside folks, our external customers, feel that impact as well. So who are we seeing today move into product operations roles? So I put out another poll, LinkedIn, my choice. I'm gonna keep doing this. But before certain folks took a role in product ops, 37% of people on this poll said that they were a PM, which is awesome. I actually think at one point when we started this, somebody asked me a question like, do you have to have a PM background to be in prod ops? I don't think you have to, but having it will help you way much more than if you didn't. And it's because I, as a product person at heart who was a PM and a manager of PM teams, I felt the pain and I knew what the PMs were going through, and it made me want to move that much faster. And I knew off the bat sometimes what just needed to be done. So if you're thinking about that, this role is growing. And if you find someone who likely takes on a whole bunch of the responsibilities, which I'll just go through in a second, who wants to take this role on, it's absolute no-brainer if you can do it. The other thing was another discipline came up, and people did write this time in the thread in LinkedIn. So a lot of the people said management consulting was a role where they were in before they took on a product ops role. And if you think about what I showed you before around the business side of things and making sure you're keeping focused on like the overarching picture of the business versus just your area of the product, management consulting folks, that's exactly what they do. And so it makes sense for them to want to continue to find a way to drive bigger goals forward or help teams do that. Can it be confusing? Yeah. This is a more recent poll, and I asked which role shares the blurriest line with the product ops role in their company, and the number one was product manager. I did not think that it was going to be that blurry. I actually thought it was going to be the program manager, but that one came in number two because that's what we're starting to see a bit more of today is what's the product ops manager's role versus the program manager. Product marketing, that one, I feel like there's enough difference in what we do and what they do where we're seeing less of that. And a couple lucky folks said no blurred lines, good for them. Would love for them to share their secret, but okay. And so similar yet different, right? Like what do we do? Product managers solve customer pain through product outcomes, while product ops solves internal customer and stakeholder pain around product delivery. PMs partner with customers and engineers to experiment and move fast. Product ops create stakeholder trust and internal alignment to empower their internal customers. And PMs build tangible features and value in the product while we build non-tangible features and value around the product. So we go back to that product-led concept and all that it takes to get a customer to purchase, to trial, to purchase, to renew, to grow what they're actually purchasing, right? Like for Pendo, for example, we'd love to see a customer come in through the core of the app and ultimately focus on buying our feedback product. How do we do that in a way that's low touch? We have to think about what systems exist so that we can get that done. So product ops people, at least today at Pendo, this is what I'm seeing most people cover. Not everything, and I'd love to hear what some people have to say about what their teams cover. But healthy product planning is a big one. What I found is now being at 1, 2, 3 companies in product, everybody has their way of planning. Everybody has their way of writing documentation. Everybody has their way of aligning stakeholders. So why not give that to somebody who's got that neutral eye that can help the teams move faster and align stakeholders so that the engineers know what to do going forward, and then you can continuously plan, right? And partner really well with agile teams. Beta management is another thing, along with release management, so they kind of go, one feeds into the other. Enablement efforts, which comes from release management. Voice of customer programs is the big one too. How do we manage all of the peripheral that's going on around the PM? Making sure roadmap updates are happening across the organization and aligning teams as to what's not happening now. System and tool ownership, content and education. We actually at Pendo own our own knowledge base as well. So we have a team of writers that does that under product ops. And then data rigor, just really keeping your systems clean with the product data and making sure that that's going where it needs to go. And some skills that we feel are really critical for product ops people are being empathetic, because you are listening to every single person's pain at the company. Like you're hearing a success manager say, product doesn't have time to do this thing that my customer keeps asking, and the PM say, oh my God, like the success manager doesn't get it. My roadmap is, like just cramped already. you have to have that empathy across the board and help them understand what's going on the other side so that they feel that empathy for each other. Focus on data. Again, no product person today will succeed without being data focused. It's not a controversial statement. You have to do it. Process driven yet iterative is the thing I mentioned earlier. Just make sure you take that away today if you're taking one thing away. Being flexible, so that goes hand in hand with third. Being a really strong communicator because you're interacting with stakeholders all around, across, up and down at any given point, and external. Being trustworthy because you are taking some responsibilities essentially that a product manager has had before. And if some of those people really love that stuff, you have to help them understand how you are an extension and a true partner. And you have to build that trust with them because they're going to succeed as long as they have that really good working relationship with you. And then really being customer centric and focused on the outcomes for them, and the strong collaborators, another big one. So we have a poll, if you guys would go in and do a quick answer here. Who's considering one of these or doing one of these things today? And Rena, you tell me how long you want to keep this up.
I think we'll give them maybe 15, 20 more seconds.
Yeah. I love it.
A lot of champions in the room.
Yay. That was my goal, right? Make a champion out of everybody. That's awesome. Spread the word. Cool. Yeah, this is all great. I think if there's data that you could take away today from this presentation, or if you want to hit me up after, obviously I'm happy to help you get some information, especially those stats I shared on what it could do for teams and for organizations that have it. It's really important. And yeah, how to improve an existing product ops practice is a big one. I'm seeing that a lot too. And yeah, career and product ops. I'm really happy that folks are considering that. Ooh, did I skip? Nope.
You know, I think it didn't come through, but let's
okay. Let's see. We did have one more Slido. Here it is. Yes, because I showed you the challenges that people face when considering product. So which of these is the biggest challenge in your org?
This is a tough one because it's almost tempting to say all of them.
Yeah, let's go with like your biggest pain.
And while we're waiting for everyone, if there's any questions and you're shy, you don't want to ask them out loud, feel free to throw them in the chat or in Slido. But of course, if you have anything that you want to ask outright, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
I love this. I feel like this speaks to my soul, which is like at the root of a product manager's heart. Like they should be experimenting and moving fast to deliver outcomes and find solutions. And so I love that this is a common pain. And this is my pitch to all of you to go ahead and pitch product ops or continue to grow your teams, because again, that's where the value, that's the benefit of having a strong partner in product operations. And then this here is the core of what we do, right? As product ops people. So cool.
So on that note, let me get us started with, I do see some questions coming in, but let me ask a question to get us started. How do we know when an organization is ready for product operations?
Yeah, we see a lot of companies go through, again, very similar things here where there's, they have agile practices in place that kind of helps with the cultural safety, like creating this psychological safety within the teams to kind of build and make sure that they're autonomous. But then the experimentation nature is not happening, and them being able to move fast and get the stakeholder buy-in is not happening. And so we kind of dig deep and we say, well, what's causing that, right? And so there's a lack sometimes of stakeholder trust in what it is that the teams are building. So that all leads to, well, how are they finding the things to build, or how are they actually finding the right problems to focus on? Going back to an earlier comment, and they don't really have the time. Like they're sometimes it's recency bias. Sometimes it's a customer who is about to churn because of something, or a competitor who's just put something seemingly amazing out in the market, and that's recent. But there's this massive amount of data around the product manager and the product itself, where they should be looking at that holistically to make sure that they're solving common pain versus for that one customer, because then they're just going to be just chasing that one problem, right? Or chasing the one customer and a little bit of revenue. So we find that. So this one definitely, it kind of aligns to this. So how do they get the data to find out what to test first and move fast and figure out which problems that they're solving? Another thing is the internal alignment. Did I put, yeah, this one here, the third one. We find a lot of companies have lack of transparency when it comes to roadmaps and what's coming and what's no longer coming. And that leads to customers who were promised something or told this was coming being really frustrated. And one of the things that I was passionate about when I started our team here at Pendo was, I don't want a customer to ever see disjointedness on the phone from my CSM and my product manager, or from anybody at Pendo, right? We don't ever want to put two Pendozers on the phone and then have the customer feel like, what, you guys aren't even talking to each other. I feel like that's huge. And so those are two things that we see. And then the other thing too is like the PM just being kind of bogged down with all these day-to-day tasks of triaging the bugs and making sure that they're there for when deal close time comes up and they need to be the SME on the call. And so it's just, there's many problems, but those are probably three of the most common ones that I see.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah.
There's a few more. I'm going to start reading them out from chat here. So thank you first for a very insightful presentation. What would be the best way to transition into a product operations role from a data analyst role?
Transition into a product role from a data analyst role, show the value of what it is that you could bring to the table, aligned to what I just mentioned before, which is you have all this, I would call it peripheral view data around the product, both from recently released features and then also from product areas that have existed in the app that could probably tell a story to the product manager and the engineer that may not have been told before. And if you have the we are just truly blessed to have a research arm as well at Pendo. It's relatively new, but it's life-changing. If you have the ability to couple that data with some of the research findings with that team or a UX researcher, I would say that's another way to do it too, is you have to sometimes build your case and say, like, here's some of the stuff we're finding, but hey, we don't see any investment going into these areas of the product where it seems to be like either low or really high usage. And you have to kind of come up with like a strong point of view and say, like, hey, if we feel as if there's a certain amount of revenue that might be left behind if this is not looked at, right? And build that case for your product manager and the team.
So demonstrating the mindset and the output, that would be okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great questions in here. So as a product ops person, how do you prioritize what areas to work on? Love that question. And how do you show what you're doing, show that you're doing a good job?
Yeah, I love that question. Product ops people, it's my belief that you should be focused on the company goals. And generally for product teams, company goals end up coming down to them, at least 75% of them for your company, depending on how you plan. And so if you're able to always draw all of your work back to the company goal, you'll naturally find where your team's focus should be going. And that's really impactful. So for our team, my team is structured. This might help answer the question, or maybe I don't know if there's anyone here that's going through how to structure your team. I've got three and an emerging fourth role on my product ops team. One is the alignment role, which exists to align people across the company, make sure that the voice of customer program is healthy so that the PM is aligned to what's going on in the market and current customers and whatnot. And also act as like the SME at times when the PM is not able to be there. So again, the extension. And today I was telling a new product manager here, he's never had product ops before. He's excited. He's like, how do you explain it in like a couple words, right? And I was like, alignment teams exist to be your product, your PR. We're here to amplify all of the amazing things that are happening for you and do damage control when things are going to slip. We're here to make sure that you have what you need in order to make the best decision for your roadmap. And that resonated. So that's one arm. And then the second is the systems team, where for Pendo, we dog food a lot. I mentioned earlier, we Pendo on Pendo. There's a lot of meta stuff that happens, but we use our own product for everything. Any tool alignment and any integrations that happen, my systems team is on top of, inclusive of also integrating any kind of voice of customer programs through our own product. So that's been really helpful. And then the third team is a technical writing team. As I mentioned, they own all of our knowledge base content and also the strategy for our guides throughout the application as we launch, or as David said, as we Pendo on a new feature. So that's cool. And then the emerging one, I saw a question in there, but there's program management that's now emerging on my team. And that's been interesting watching the space unfold because program managers can actually sit anywhere in an org is my belief, and project managers can too. But going back to the beginning, the question that was just asked, how do you know where to focus your team's time? There are delivery programs that need to happen around the product that somebody with that product mentality and iterative nature, we believe they have to manage that. And it's not going to come from a central PMO org. And so we're working on building out that role under product operations at Pendo, where something that's a massive effort that's cross-functional in every department is going to be aligned by that program manager to make sure everything is moving along. And they partner with every other process person to make sure it's happening.
I love that. I love that. I'd like to add on and say that I think, and one of the reasons why so many individuals have gone into product operations from product management is that pragmatic concept of prioritization and aligning to business objectives applies to product operations. And that instead of, it's not a product, you're talking about operational transformation and empowerment. And tying what you're working on ultimately to your corporate objectives is the same. You're building a different type of roadmap. You're not building product, you're building process and practice and empowerment across the organization. So I think a lot of the things that we know when we think about product are essentially translatable to how you approach and prioritize within product operations. Is that, I threw a lot of words into your mouth there. Hopefully I didn't go on.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. And I think like the one thing I will say too is like, I think it's easier for me to give that answer and some of what you just said too, because maybe we've experienced product operations, but maybe some folks on the phone are asking too, like where does a relatively new product ops team focus their energy? And it is around the pain of the company. And so like for us, we did a poll when we first started to the PM saying, on average, for example, how much time do you get to spend actually with customers doing quality calls a week versus like firefighting? And what's your goal? Like, where do you want to be? We put out a poll to our revenue team around sentiment for how ready they felt around new feature launch. And that really helped us in the first 6 months, I would say, prioritize where the operational pain needed to kind of like figure out like which operational pain needed to be focused on first. So for those that are early in the game, I would say talk to your cross-functional partners and your product leadership team and find out where the structural operational pain is, and then get the data from your teams, your company, and a quick Google poll, and then you'll get that data and figure out where to put your emphasis or your time.
Beautiful. Okay, so this is a fantastic question. They're all really great questions, so I'm just kind of going through them here. Do you think with the introduction of the product ops role, there's the risk of unintentionally creating a power structure? I know we're looking for partnership, but I think the question is can the role actually, instead of creating partnership, create friction?
I've been asked this question quite a bit, and I think it starts with the buy-in from the organization around product operations. And if, again, it shouldn't be looked at as an addition to the product team. It should be looked at as a muscle for the entire company. And once you have that buy-in in how this role is going to change how the company operates around the product and the delivery of all of the goodness that's coming out of it, that's where there's kind of this neutrality created between the product ops person and the product manager, and saying like, where is it that you're experiencing the most pain, PM? Where can we make sure that you're spending more time with the customer and with your engineers? And how do we help build more systems that are going to allow you to do that and be measured well? And so I don't know. And luckily, I'm knocking on wood, I haven't seen where people are like, I hate my prod ops manager. And like, I'll go back to the poll, right? Like the NPS measure where it was like over 20 for folks who would recommend being a PM because they have a strong prod ops team or have it in general. So I'm sure that there are places where friction has been created, but it's all about trying to have your team focus on what modern product management today. And if you look back at that history of product management, obviously the space itself is going to iterate, just as how sales ops evolved and started and evolved, marketing ops evolved. Every single arm of a fast growing business or a technology business today, or even non-tech companies, are going to experience some sort of a maturation of their product team. So that's what you really need to lean on and help people understand what the company needs to grow, not that individual PM.
Yeah. And I think power struggles often exist because individuals or teams don't understand how they're contributing, where their impact is going to be, the value that they're driving, or the pains that others are trying to solve. So that transparency and that heightening is definitely very powerful. I love that. Joey, you have your hand up. So I love a spoken question.
No, thanks for the presentation, Christine. I guess my question is trying to figure out, like, you talked a lot about the history of product management. Do you think product operations is like the evolution, or is it just like a separate branch that's kind of forming? Like,
I think, it's a great question. I think it's a separate branch that's forming, similar to how we had the breakout of the role of product marketing manager and product an engineer. I think that there's a distinction and like a specialty in which somebody can grow in product and grow their career through another arm versus just being a PM. So that history, hopefully in a couple of years, we'll look back and say, oh, the growth of product operations happened in like a certain time frame that truly empowered the PM to have an executive space at the table.
Awesome.
Okay, let's pick another one from the messages here. Christine, thank you for a fantastic presentation. I concur with that. Appreciate it. In an agile environment, the demand is usually driven by the product owner and the owner operator. What is the best way for product operations to prepare for this task?
Aniket, would you elaborate a little bit more on this so I understand it a little bit more? She's still on the call.
Yes. And thank you for taking the question. I mean, like, again, with respect to the guild's question, like, we are transcending boundaries in terms of the roles which we are defining with respect to the product operations, defining processes as well. So getting the need for the product is determined probably by the owner operator and the product owner. So would you suggest that will it be within the space of product ops to do that task, or is it not? Is it my misunderstanding?
Oh no, there's a bit of the voice of customer management that's the data piece that I kept mentioning today. The product manager has a plethora of data in front of them, but they're managing not just their adoption and their growth and all that type of data. Now I mentioned like they're managing these business metrics as well as something that they have to stay on top of. And so when you think about that, if we have somebody else focus on this piece of voice of customer management where there's churn data, there's addressable market data, there's inbound coming in from prospects, like to have a PM have to manage all of that on top of the metrics that they're managing for their product itself or the features is asking a PM a lot. And so I've definitely found where a product manager wants to stay close to it, but the actual management of it and wrangling all that data and creating that voice of customer program is a lot. it's a full-time job at this point for some people to do. I have one person dedicated to actually building that program on my team itself. So I would say it's a shared responsibility for the product ops manager and the product owner or product manager to get to the complete data set, especially when you think about planning and figuring out the right things to prioritize. But there's so many different data points that you have to find which one you can focus on building and pulling into your process, and which one somebody else can help you out with. Hopefully that answers your question. Great.
Here's a tie-in question that seems somewhat related. So, hi, Christine. Traditional PMs have been responsible for both the product strategy and execution. With the introduction of product ops, would you describe it as partially taking over some of the executional elements of the traditional PM role?
To me, the executional elements of a traditional PM role are going through and finding the right problems to solve, prioritizing those problems, championing them across their engineering team, and then working and figuring out the right schedule to deliver value to customers, and also experimenting, or that's not so traditional, but it's more common now, to make sure that they're iterating fast. None of that is what we do in product operations. The experiment piece, maybe here and there, because we'll get creative and we'll test a guide here and there to see what's resonating a little bit more and give that data back to the PM. But we don't do the prioritization. We don't go out and champion it with the engineers. We don't plan. We don't do any of that stuff.
I think what it definitely does do is shift what, to your point, should be our executional focus within product management, but is often not the executional focus because of the other many hats and priorities and things that we're juggling. By having a team, a partner that's dedicated and focused on the elements that you've described, it actually enables us, going back to enablement, enables us to focus on those things as our execution. Okay, we've got a few more questions here. Oh, I feel like I'm missing some here. How do you differentiate the executives product ops, those execution within product ops, versus a safe scaled agile framework, agile practice of excellence? In some companies, some of the processes overlap and easily misunderstood. Arun, I'm probably mangled your question. Let me know if you need me, if you want to correct that at all.
I think I understand it, which is there overlap between product operations and how we operate and build process and then agile teams, or correct, Arun?
Yeah. So yeah, my question is around like, how do we differentiate for the executives, like, right? When they pitch it in terms of agile, safe agile, so they also have most of this functionalities like strategy, how to like reporting in terms of different product teams, going to a strategy and everything. So in terms of that, the product ops role seems to overlap in some cases. So how do we differentiate these roles to the executives?
Yeah, I think it depends on the level of safe that's adopted by your company too. Like some people are safe, like hardcore. I've seen this come up before where the agile folks are responsible for inbound coming in after a feature is launched. That's rare where I see the agile team actually taking on the responsibility of kind of looking at all of that stuff, but it does happen. I think the piece that we use here to differentiate is in the planning and then actual delivery and how we partner with our agile team. And so like my team, for example, builds the process for product planning, ideation and healthy product planning. And then we end at the alignment part where we've got alignment from our stakeholders at a high level on what it is that we're going to execute on for the next program increment. And then we hand it over to agile and we say to them, it's your responsibility now to have the teams make sure that they're marching forward with building out these plans at a more detailed level and continue to operate with our team so that we continue to have transparency with our stakeholders, just in case we're missing sort of expectations there. And then they obviously carry it through in their normal day-to-day Scrum meetings and all of that good stuff as well. When it comes to delivery of the product and then kind of managing all of the things after, like I mentioned, tickets or metrics or anything like that, I don't usually see agile teams going through that. They are responsible for escalating kind of tickets that come in, depending on what's going on, but I don't really see them kind of doing the day-to-day management of the stuff. I hope that answers it a little bit. There's There's little overlap, but it's a healthy kind of overlap because it's kind of the process people that are facilitating a certain early part and then kind of moving over to Agile for the execution. And then we actually illustrate I have an illustration of this. It's ideation and exploration, and then execution and planning. And then we move into release management and delivery of the feature out to the market. So it goes prod ops, Agile, prod ops.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine.
Yeah, no problem.
We have hit 7 o'clock, and I'm sure that that, like myself, you probably could spend many more hours talking to Christine about product operations, but I'm going to respect her time and thank you for joining us. And hopefully we can get if this was the introduction to product ops, a more in-depth conversation where we can tackle some more challenging questions or more deeper questions and take a look at some of the process elements, which I think seems to be bubbling up. So hopefully we'll have Christine back again to share all of her knowledge and experience around product ops. But thank you, Christine, for your time today. And thank you, everyone else.
Thank you for having me. I was really excited to be here.
Thanks. For anyone else who wants to stick around, we will do a virtual networking breakout session. So just stick around and we'll go into some breakout rooms and have some conversation.